My name is Stefanie Hammond, and I'm the head sales and marketing nerd here at Enable. I've been with Enable for a long time, actually coming into my 17th year next month, which is quite exciting, I think. So I've had a lot of different roles during that time, much on the sales and account management side. So my previous role prior to becoming the head sales and marketing nerd, I was the principal account manager for our elite and super elite partners. So lots of different ways to get a hold of me if you'd like. My email is there. I'm on LinkedIn, so if you happen to be on LinkedIn as well, I would love to connect, and then you can also follow me on Twitter. Okay. Just another, I guess, housekeeping item before we start the boot camp. Wanted to let everybody know about a new program that we've recently launched at Enable that we're calling the Enable All-Star Program. And the Enable All-Star Program, we're using this to kind of recognize and encourage and reward partners who are consistently showing up for their success. You know, whether they're attending events, road shows, joining boot camps like you are today, my office hours, if you're kind enough to serve as an advocate. The All-Stars really strengthen the MSP community while actively empowering their own growth. So you can see on this slide, we have a points system, and points are going to be allocated to each event or each activity that you participate in. And then each year we're going to choose, I don't know if the number's been determined yet, but I've been hearing anywhere between 200 and 300 All-Stars. It's going to be broken down by geography. So APAC and EMEA, they'll have their own All-Stars, and then North America will have their own All-Stars based on the accumulated points earned according to your levels of engagement, advocacy, you know, Enable product expertise, and you'll be recognized at our upcoming Empower events. We're having Prague in May, so Prague's gonna be taking place May 9th to 13th, and then in North America, it's gonna be in Vegas, and I think it's October 3rd to 6th, if I can remember off the top of my head. But really, at the end of the day, the more you do, the more you gain, and I've been told that there's gonna be some really nice rewards and swags to kind of help you celebrate. So why are you here? So let's take a look at what the agenda is for today's session and what I hope that you're going to take away from today's session. So we're going to be discussing the evolution of program design compared to where we stand today, and why we feel that there's really a need to pivot in our approach. If you've been into the Institute, if you've listened to the existing program development courses that are in there, I really felt that a refresh was needed, because those were developed probably 4 or 5 years ago now when I did them the first time around. So now that I'm in this new role, I really felt that there was a need, and especially with it being kind of Cybersecurity Awareness Month and really how the security landscape has evolved over the last several years, I really felt there was a need to kind of update and modernize that particular boot camp. So, you know, when we review, and part of this presentation is we're going to be reviewing a new security services, you know, program framework that you can use as is, or you can use as a springboard to designing your own suite of security programs. Then we are going to review our costing calculator, how you would go about pricing out your new programs. And then we're going to review how to position and how to sell these new programs to your prospects and customers. And we're going to review some scripting on how you can overcome a lot of those common objections that you may hear. So this is going to be a 3-part training course. So hopefully you got your coffee and you're settled in. It is going to be quite lengthy. We're going to kick things off by first reviewing the program design structure, the philosophies, and methodologies that we feel MSPs should be adopting today. So our market landscape, it has changed quite dramatically, and over the last 10 years, our MSPs have evolved quite dramatically as well. MSPs have really gone from offering basic break fix engagements, where the MSP goes out on site, fix something that's broken, they're rolling a truck, and then, when they get back to the office, they send an invoice afterwards, for whatever amount of time it took to fix that. And we've kind of moved from that old break fix model to the managed services model, where we're offering prepaid managed services contracts, where we're promising uptime, reliability, and performance stability of the networks. But now, MSPs really need to evolve again, and their programs and their sales messaging needs to evolve again, because they really need to start addressing the real security threats and the concerns that are plaguing a lot of the businesses today. And the message, it's no longer about providing uptime and avoiding downtime. That was the Hughes message, 10, 15 years ago with managed services, stop paying for downtime and start paying for uptime. Those benefits are really, they're a given now. So MSPs now need to shift their message and start focusing on how to best protect and secure their customers and keep them safe. That's the new messaging now, because as an MSP, your customers expect that you're already doing this for them. So security discussions, planning, enforcement, or really lack thereof, that's really become the #1 reason why MSPs are either winning or losing clients. And so as a result, today's new approach to program development that we're going to go through, it really demands that programs have an enhanced cybersecurity focus. And MSPs need to build and enforce what I'm calling this minimum viable cybersecurity program for all of your customers to standardize on. Again, going back to our old material that's on the Institute, it's outdated. And we talk about a responsive program. We talk about a la carte, and those approaches are no longer good approaches. Having you allow your customers to kind of pick their own path to support and choosing how they want to buy, that's no longer a safe business practice, because it puts you as the MSP and your customer at considerable risk. And nothing what I'm going to be saying today is going to be terribly revolutionary. MSPs have always included a basic set of security services in their programs, but with the emergence of the new threat actors over the past couple of years, new security technologies, they need to be introduced. They need to be incorporated into your programs so that you can continue to keep businesses, along with their intellectual property, their digital assets, their personal and financial information, as protected as possible. And so as a result, all customer conversations now should lead with security. And your conversation should be revolving around discussing risk mitigation strategies, and should aim to kind of educate your prospects and your clients on why there's a necessity now to improve their overall security posture. Because net new customer acquisition continues to be the #1 challenge facing MSPs today, and the struggle's real, because every business has an MSP that they're using already today. So the problem becomes, how can I guess effectively steal business away from another MSP? How can I set myself apart from all the other MSPs in the space? And you can do this by repositioning or remarketing yourselves as cybersecurity experts, as that way to differentiate your MSP from your competitors. And we want to provide you with a way to do this, by presenting you with kind of our security services program framework that you can use to build a new suite of security programs off of, that you can then take to market. And that's going to set you up as that authority figure and that expert, in the hopes that you will then be able to kind of entice businesses away from, their incumbent MSP that they're using today, and bring them over to you. Because there is a lot of growth opportunities still to be had in the cybersecurity space. There was a recent 2020 Security Services Trends Report, and it came from the Robert Herjavec Group. And it found that of all the cyber threats facing organizations today, 73% listed ransomware as their top threat concerning their organization, followed by 57% who listed loss of customer data as the top threat, and 39% listed email account compromise as their top threat. And then from that same report, 37% of organizations cited security as a top priority for their executive management team, and 42% said that they expected their budgets allocated to managed security services was going to increase. So all of this really kind of is pushing MSPs to put a plan in place to rejuvenate those security conversations with their customers. And security is still a green space that's wide open to them. Customers really want to be having these conversations with their service provider. And our best-in-class MSPs, they've recognized this, and they're leveraging security to increase their margins, to accelerate their growth of their business, because they have recognized that there is enormous revenue opportunities to be had by really revamping, what they're previously offering and making that transition and moving forward with more of a security first mindset, when it comes to working with their prospects and their customers. And so really MSPs need to go out, they need to speak to their customers, they need to educate their customers around cybersecurity and the challenges that old traditional thinking that's still out there today. And we really need to work to help advance the security posture of our customers. And to do this, MSPs need to start by evolving their programs if they really are looking to progress forward. And so looking at your programs, do they need a refresh? If you can answer, kind of yes to, one or some of the questions, then your programs may need some sort of makeovers. And kind of the hit list there, are your customers asking you about security today? Do your customers seem concerned about their own security protection? For those in regulated industries, are your customers concerned about their compliancy obligations? Are you confident as their MSP that you have put in place the proper risk mitigation and controls across your across your customers? And what I mean by this is, do you have holes in your existing programs today when it comes to overall security coverage and protection for your customers' networks? And again, hopefully there was some yeses in some of those previous questions, that yes, my customers are asking about security today, and yes, they do seem concerned about their own security protection, or yes, they are concerned about how they can meet their compliance requirements, or maybe yes, my existing programs may not be providing the most comprehensive protection coverage that's needed today. That's to thwart a lot of those threats and attacks that are prevalent today. Because the big question that's on every business owner's mind, whether they're able to articulate it or not, is, am I properly protected? And am I vulnerable? And that is what MSPs need to be helping their clients determine, and what they can help address through your security services. Because vulnerabilities, they occur. They already exist in a lot of systems at some level. It really is just taking someone at this point to find them. Whether that person is, some sort of security researcher, some sort of nation state, a bounty hunter, or a cyber criminal. And if this is not a concern for your customers, and if they're not concerned about their security protection levels, then you as their MSP really need to work to kind of educate them on this. And so from an education standpoint, security tax, I think you just have to look at any of the headlines today, and you can say that they're still prevalent, they're on the rise globally. A 2021 SonicWall Cyber Threat Report, they come out with 2 reports a year. Their mid-year update, they were saying that ransomware for the first half of 2021 is up 151% over the same time period in 2020. And so this is just really proving still that this is just a business for hackers. They really don't care who they go after. It's not personal to them. And as long as they can continue to make money off of vulnerable businesses, the threats and the attacks, they're going to continue. And so it's the responsibility of MSPs to really highlight areas where businesses are vulnerable and provide that guidance on how to better protect their customers. And again, SMBs, your customers, they're looking for assistance on these best practices regarding security protocols, especially when dealing with this new work from home environment or our new virtual world. MSPs are the ones that are best equipped to educate and manage this for their customers, because nothing is 100% when it comes to security. MSPs can't assume that they're going to be able to block all threats. So threat isolation, threat detection, and remediation are just as important now as threat prevention. And because all protective measures have their own set of weaknesses and vulnerabilities, we talk about this layered approach to security that's necessary to provide the best type of protection. And it's this layered approach to security that really does provide you with those new revenue stream opportunities that you can really capitalize on. But besides the increase in ransomware attacks, what we're also seeing in the first half of 2021 is an increase in new threat actors in the marketplace and that the bad guys are using. So here we're looking at intrusion attempts, IoT malware, encrypted threats, web-based attacks. So when you're looking at these new threat actors beyond just ransomware, MSPs really need to review their program offerings that they're currently selling. And they need to complete, kind of an honest assessment, an honest overview of how well does their current stack up to being able to really mitigate, a lot of these new breed of threat actors that we're seeing. And a lot of it, traditional AV can no longer protect, because honestly, a lot of the programs that I'm still seeing being offered out in the market today, they're not doing a good enough job, I feel, at properly protecting their customers from a lot of these different types of attacks, which in turn unwillingly causes exponential risk for you as the MSP, because weak customer security leads to weak MSP security. Because it isn't about if a business is going to experience a breach, but it's about when they are going to experience a breach. And I know we've been saying this for quite some time. And we now need to really expand the thinking to now also include what will we do and how will we respond when we do get attacked? How will it be handled? Because again, it just isn't about threat prevention anymore. So it's your job as the MSP to go out and have those difficult conversations with your customers if you know that they're not being properly protected, or if they have areas that are underprotected when it comes to their network, to really educate them on how to avoid being that potential target and what you need to be allowed to do to prevent an attack on their business. And a lot of partners, a lot of MSPs, they're avoiding having these types of conversations because they fear the pushback, that they're going to very likely receive from their customers, and that their recommendations that they're going to be recommending are going to be rejected. So through today's session, one of my primary goals is to provide you with the tools and the confidence to really go out there and have those candid conversations, and then, hopefully make a bit more money on the side. So from a program design perspective, I do get asked quite regularly, because I have office hours every month, and it seems that at every office hours, I get the question around program design and program development. How many levels should I have? Does the bronze, silver, gold tier structure still work? What should I include in my programs? So really my message has always been, you don't want to create different levels for the sake of creating different levels. You want to think about the philosophy around your program offerings and then what you're looking to achieve with each distinct level that you build. And up to this point, I've been using the term kind of security and cybersecurity, but the conversations that MSPs really need to be having and that we want to focus our program design principles around should be focused on risk identification, risk tolerance, risk mitigation, and more importantly, risk ownership. because security, it really does tend to be binary. Like, are you secure or are you not secure? And that's not really the conversation that MSPs should be having, because it isn't about whether a business is secure or not. It's about how much risk are they exposed to, and how much ownership of that risk do they want to keep and manage themselves versus offloading and transferring over to you as their MSP. And that risk, it does come down to that end user, because we know that employees tend to be the cause of the breach in most cases. I think one of the stats I read recently, up to 37, 40% of the time of breaches, it's caused because something happened between the chair and the keyboard. So MSPs really need to do whatever they can to really like bubble wrap that end user to help prevent that breach from happening. But besides the employees, there's other risk factors that we need to take into account as well, so that we can assess, a company's overall risk rating. So we need to look at the industry that they're in. We want to look at the annual revenues, their employee size, the amount and the type of data that they're collecting. Maybe look at the types of vendor partnerships that they have. And then using this information, we determine, then what are the tactics or what are the strategies, what's that ideal cybersecurity solution that the MSP needs to put in place to then mitigate that risk. And so risk is really on a scale, again, depending on the industry, depending on the employee size, the types of data they're collecting, the types of data that they're using and have access to, the partnerships, all of that. Some businesses are going to be exposed to higher levels of risk, and therefore they're going to need a more comprehensive security package, while their other businesses may have lower levels of risk and not require such an extensive package. And really, the key is to understand your customers, their businesses, their industries, their business risk exposure, and then you use all of that to build out your security programs accordingly to help lower that risk exposure. So before we can really begin, kind of blowing up our programs and starting over from a program design perspective, you want to conduct a review of your existing base first, to really assess each client's overall risk level and risk tolerance. And this exercise is going to help you then determine how many program levels do you really need to build and consider going to market with. So again, going back to that bronze, silver, gold. After you going through this exercise, you may decide that you don't need 3 program levels anymore. You may just decide you need 1, or maybe you decide you need 2. So really, I always encourage partners just to open up an Excel spreadsheet, list out all of your customers in column A. Column B, just have a simple heading called risk rating, and then go through each customer and give them a ranking of either high, medium, or low. And so to help with that categorization, you can think of a high-risk business, and therefore a high-risk business would need some sort of advanced or comprehensive or higher-end security package. And so this would be a business that resides, likely in the financial or healthcare sector, government sector. They're fairly large in size, and therefore they've accumulated a vast amount of data that would be attractive to adversaries. They have employees that have access to highly sensitive systems, and they have access to vast amounts of customer data, both personal and financial. A high-risk organization, they have employees that have access to this valuable company intellectual property. They have partnerships or relationships with other large key organizations, and therefore employees would likely have access to that information as well because of those partnerships. And that if that business is breached, or if they experience some sort of ransomware attack that was successful in stealing their data, it would be detrimental to that business, and it could result in irreparable harm and maybe even an extinction event for them. And then looking at a medium risk business, and this would be more of a candidate for maybe an advanced or a mid-range program or high end, again, depending. But a medium risk business, They do have some attractive data. They do have some attractive partnerships, but they got a smaller footprint in terms of their data volumes, in terms of their company size, overall revenues. So they would still be considered a target because of the data that the employees would have. And then looking at a low risk business, and therefore these would be the ones that would just need kind of that minimum viable program that I spoken about, and that I will give you an example of a minimum viable program. So a low risk business, they're just going to need a basic level of security at this point. So they're smaller in size, limited number of employees, limited number of partnerships, which means that they're not collecting, they're not storing a whole lot of sensitive data. A lot of times, a lot of their financial processing is outsourced to a third-party company, so it isn't even completed in-house. And then if breached, it wouldn't be detrimental to that business. You know, that business would very likely survive. So the breach impact would be low. So not considered to be a real target to adversaries, but at the same time, we can't discount their size and allow them to have lax security. So as you begin to speak to your customers and your prospects about your new security programs, there's going to be three, I call them kind of the three main objections that you're likely going to hear from them. You know, why do I need to change my services that I have with you? You know, I thought you were already taking care of that, or I thought I was already protected. So your best type of response when you hear some sort of pushback like this is really, it comes down to education. You know, you have to let your customers know that things are very different now than they were 3 to 5 years ago. You want to be upfront, you want to be honest, you want to tell them that due to the ever-changing threat landscape, what you recommended as security best practices 3 to 5 years ago isn't what you are recommending today. You know, new technology needs to be incorporated to continue to provide the best possible protection to kind of keep ahead of the bad actors that are out there. So to better protect against the risk of ransomware or phishing attacks, your security packages needed to change. And as you needed now to enforce stronger security measures on yourself, you needed to push this across to your customers as well. And if anybody's been on any of my boot camps or in my office hours in the past, the next couple of slides you've seen before. And this is really about how you go about educating your customers on the needs of these changes. And these are part of your handout. They're available for download, the partner slides, security education. So the next 3 slides are part of that download. Because again, when you're thinking about your security programs and what you should include in them, you want to center your offerings around protecting your clients' employees and protecting your clients' data. These are the most important design philosophies that you want to keep in mind. And so customer education is going to be needed so you can better explain why there is a need for changes to your packages and why you are enforcing these changes within your own MSP and your customers. So to really, begin that education process, it's going to be helpful to explain to customers really in layman terms, how that attack proliferates throughout their environment. And again, people, if you've attended this, you might have seen this before. As an MSP, I know you know this already. You're all very well aware of how an attack can kind of worm its way through a customer's environment. But your customers, because they aren't technical, they likely don't or they won't understand how an attack works. So it's going to be very beneficial to take the time to explain that to them. Because by educating customers on how an attack works and explaining how the bad guys are kind of able to infiltrate the network to steal a business's data, that's going to go a long way in helping you to really set that stage again around why you're making the changes you are in terms of what you're mandating for them in terms of security. And the bottom line is again, at the center of your cybersecurity and risk mitigation strategy is protecting the customer's data. Data, we all know, the most important asset outside of their employees. And this is really where the value is for the bad guys and what the bad guys are after, because without a company's data, an organization could potentially be put out of business. So in reviewing how an attack happens and the complexity, behind an attack, we all know that it just isn't that somebody clicks on something. It's when somebody clicks on something and then it causes this whole chain reaction and starts this domino effect, with the end result basically causing that device to become encrypted, or worse, allowing that breach to occur. And so when we look at something like, kind of the Ryuk ransomware and how that type of attack can be successful, it really starts with some sort of malicious email that makes its way into the employee's inbox. And the end user believes that this email is actually legitimate. So it's some sort of phishing attempt at this point. And then because the end user believes the email is legitimate, they go ahead and they click on it. There's some sort of link that's in their email. They think the email's legit, and they go ahead and click on that malicious link in that email. And then a PowerShell code is called. And then from that PowerShell code, it goes back to the internet to the payload server that resides in the cloud, somewhere out there on the internet. And then a payload server, we all know, is where that bad code is stored for this particular piece of ransomware software. And then from there, the payload server then installs, that malicious malware file on that device. And it's at this point that the end user, they possibly are not aware of anything out of the ordinary that's going on. This is just kind of all running in the background. And then as soon as that file is activated, it then goes back to the internet, to download a trick bot. And now this trick bot, it may just sit there on the device and persist until that bad guy decides to activate it and let it loose. Or it could start running automatically on the machine once it's installed. It really kind of all depends on what the code is. And then this is really where the trouble begins. If there isn't proper protection measures in place on that network, we can then experience this lateral spread across the network where we could start infecting other employees' machines that are on that network. And then that trick bot would then start to run on that device, of which all machines then reach back out to the internet layer and download the ransomware software. And then next thing we know, that device has become encrypted. And again, I know you know this, but your customers don't. So and I'm a non-technical person, and I find that this does an awesome job of helping to illustrate how that threat can proliferate through your customer's environment because somebody clicked on something that they shouldn't have in an email that they shouldn't have received in the first place. And then in your explanation, you want to highlight to your customer that a ransomware attack, as you can see here, touches multiple layers surrounding their data. And some layers are impacted more than once. And then with this same slide, what we're doing here is we want to explain again and educate that things are different now. And because things are different now, the services that you're recommending today have to be different than what you recommended previously. Because again, 5 years ago, the traditional MSP's answer to security was AV, patch, firewall, backup. At that time, those first 4 services, they were fine, they were okay. They provided sufficient protection coverage as threats. They weren't as sophisticated, and we were all working in offices and we were behind corporate firewalls. And the thought process was, as long as you had a solid AV, you're pretty much golden. But in today's threat landscape, is that enough? It absolutely is not. So looking at our layered security diagram again, you can see that with this old approach of AV, patch, firewall, and backup, there are layers that are left underprotected, and there's layers that are left completely unprotected. And here I'm looking at the internet layer and the people layer specifically. So there are gaps now in the customer's old security coverage. The old minimum standard for essential security, it needs to change because we now need to plug these gaps that have surfaced. And so MSPs need to develop and promote more comprehensive security packages that need to plug these gaps. And so we're looking at new security technologies like first replacing traditional AV at the device level with some sort of next-gen AV, like an endpoint detection and response, or what we call an EDR, which provides a broader, more advanced protection against zero-day threats. It also includes rollback capabilities if something should get through, because then you can then get that device back to a pre-attack healthy state, again, should something get through. And then we're looking at email filtering, and we're looking at spam protection, and we're looking at DNS and URL filtering. We're looking at secure web gateway, advanced firewall. These are all at the internet layer, because if we can stop the attack at the perimeter from even getting into the network into the first place and reaching that end user, that's a win-win-win all the way around. And then at the network layer, potentially adding in network and log monitoring. And then at the people layer, we're adding in features like password management, multi-factor authentication, 2FA. And then at the application layer, putting in some sort of application control and vulnerability management. And then backup recovery testing, with the possibility of maybe, depending on the risk rating of the customer, implementing some standby systems so that we can ensure that all data can be recovered. Because again, should something get through, because nothing is 100% guaranteed, you want to make sure that you're including backup in all of your program levels. And then also including some security user training, something like a KnowBe4 is a popular add-on that partners can use to help them with their security education. And so your new minimum standard for security would now look something like this. This would be the complete picture that we're looking at today in terms of what is needed to protect a client's most important asset outside of its employees, and that's its data. And again, the idea with what we just went through is to educate customers why these changes are necessary. The old model of AV, patch, firewall, backup is no longer sufficient. And so that's why changes are needed from a cybersecurity program design standpoint. And because of these changes that you need to implement to provide this better protection, it is going to necessitate an increase in the monthly price. Which then brings us around to program packaging. And so what you're seeing here, this is also available as a download. It's the Excel file so that you can play around with it, but don't play around with it too much, but it kind of gives you that framework and that overview. Because again, that question that I seem to get asked on a weekly basis is, how should I be packaging up my programs? And I know, I've just spent 40 minutes kind of preambling, and I could have probably just got right to the point and shown you this slide. But I felt that it was important to put some context behind it, to explain why we have built the programs out the way that we have, and why we have the levels that we have, and why we've included the services the way we had in each program. And so once you've completed your risk-based segmentation exercise on your customers, you've given them each a rating of high, medium, and low. That's going to really help you determine what do you need to build in terms of your packages, and how many levels, and what do you can or what do you want to offer to your customers. So depending on the overall risk level of your customers, high, medium, or low, that's going to help you determine how many program levels you should build and go to market with. And so this chart really outlines our suggested approach to program design, where each program level addresses a certain risk rating classification. That's our philosophy around why we have the 4 different programs here. A lot of the times when I see the bronze, silver, gold, a lot of times it's the same program. We've just kind of played around with the support structure end of it, which really isn't it's not really 3 different programs. It's one program. We're just kind of making the support part end of things more of an a la carte. But really with this idea and with this structure, each program level is designed to specifically protect businesses based on how you've classified them from an overall risk rating perspective. Again, centered around risk tolerance and risk acceptance. And just a little point from a point of clarification, this is really, this program guide that you're seeing here is best for your outsourced IT services, your traditional managed services clients. It's aimed at those organizations who don't have any internal IT people at their location. So you would basically be their outsourced offsite IT department. Not to be said that you probably couldn't use pieces of this and develop, kind of more customized services when you're dealing with a co-managed type of client. Most definitely, but that's not the intent of this program outlined today. This framework is more for your traditional managed services clients. And again, this is an initial framework. Each program level has its own target customer type based on their risk level, but at the higher levels, and I'm talking about maybe the advanced or the comprehensive and MSSP addendum, feel free to kind of massage this a bit, change this up as you feel is necessary, because at the end of the day, you know your customers, you know your market best, and there may be some technologies that you're using that might be missing from my chart. And if there are, I would love to hear about those technologies that I might be missing, or what services you might be doing that I might be missing. I did go through this with Lewis Pope, our security head nerd. I did go through this with David Weeks, our Senior Director of Partner Experience. I did provide this to our PAC, our Partner Advisory Council, to get their input. So, but this is really at the end of the day a Rev 1. So I know as I deliver this bootcamp more and more and really start interacting with partners on this, if there's changes or if there's improvements or if there's technologies or services that I'm missing, I would love to hear it so I can get it incorporated into a Rev 2. But really the primary point that I want to make is that you want to have a minimum viable program that every client gets enrolled in. And then it goes up from there, really depending on the customer's risk rating, their risk tolerance, and risk ownership preferences. And so starting at the left-hand side, this is the essential security program. This is what I'm calling the base program level that an MSP would offer. It's that minimum set of core services that every customer has to have. And you as the MSP, you don't sell below this. We strongly recommend not stripping out any of these services in a desire to reduce the average price point to meet some sort of customer's monthly budget, because the way the essential security was designed was to really make sure that each of those 5 layers surrounding the customer data has some sort of initial protection coverage on it. So if you start stripping off services to reduce the price point, you're now exposing one of those layers and you're increasing the risk. So I really look at this program as being aimed at your low risk customers that you've identified. And so looking at your essentials program, and we've kind of broken each of the different programs into different categories: IT services, security services, backup services, training, consulting, and support. And from an IT services standpoint, this is everything that you would find in a standard proactive program, with respect to we're monitoring every single device that they have on the network, every router, every switch, every firewall, server, workstation, and we're doing proactive preventative maintenance on all of those devices. So all these devices get imported into N-Central or RMM, and they are part of the monitoring and maintenance activities that you perform. And then looking at the minimum security services that would be included at this level, here we're looking at doing some sort of monthly security risk assessment, firewall monitoring and management, including endpoint protection. I have it as AV or EDR, but given kind of the prevalence and the breadth and depth of the different actors from a threat standpoint that are out there today, highly recommend that you start including EDR, endpoint detection and response, as part of your minimum program. Making sure that you're doing complete patch management on all the applications, including Windows and any third-party patching that needs to be done, mail filtering, mail protection, and then including and enforcing 2FA and having password management invoked. Then looking at the backup services, and backup should be included even at the minimum level. So here we're looking at backing up of any critical documents that are on the desktop. I'm talking about, your Word and Excel and your PDFs and your PowerPoints, those critical work documents. If they have servers on site, making sure we're backing up the critical documents on those servers. Or if the customer is part of Office 365, M365, you offer, or if you're the MSP that is moving, most MSPs are, moving their customers into Microsoft 365, then you want to include backup of the M365 as well at this level. And then from a training services standpoint, including some sort of basic security awareness training. And here I'm thinking something like 2 hours of end user phishing training, maybe once a year, gets included into this program so that you can provide some basic awareness around what does a phishing attack look like? Like, how can employees identify what a potential phishing attack looks like? Something like that, something that you could probably do yourself. And then from a consulting and reporting, you're already doing your monthly reporting out to customers. You're already, hopefully doing some sort of executive business reviews with your customers. So looking at doing 1 or 2 of these a year so that you can talk about, where their network is going, help them with their asset lifecycle planning, that type of thing. And then in regards to your support services, at this level, everything would be add-on. So all help desk calls, emails, chats, emergency support, reactive support, vendor management, these are all out of scope, and they would be billed at your time material rate, or maybe you sell them a block and then you just kind of pull off of the block. And then, the next program to the right, I'm calling it the advanced security program. And this is where we're really beginning to see that shift of risk ownership from the business owner over to the MSP. This is where you begin to assume more and more of that customer's business risk. And as such, you need to include a more advanced set of security features and higher end consulting services in order to better meet and help mitigate that risk and provide better protection coverage. So the advanced program would really be aimed at, your medium risk customers, your medium to high risk customers. And here we're looking at supplementing the advanced with everything that's already included in the essentials program, but we're adding some additional security features. So anti-phishing, dark web monitoring, DNS filtering, web protection, disk encryption, vulnerability management, potentially mail archiving. And I know as I start getting from the advanced and the comprehensive, these programs, Enable doesn't have all the products that you need to be able to deliver all these features. Pretty much we got you covered at the essentials program level, but as you move forward into the advanced and the comprehensive, there's going to be probably other vendors that you're going to need to look at to fulfill a lot of these features. So what I'm just doing here is giving you an idea of what you should have, and then you'll have to work to go out and vet your own vendors in terms of what products you might need. So then looking at your backup, here we're looking at doing more at the desktop level in terms of backup and backing up the complete desktop. So not just the critical documents, but we're looking at the server, the system state. From the server perspective, the full data, the full system state backup, again, just not that critical data that's being stored on the server. Moving to include disaster recovery planning and testing of the backup recovery process. And then from a training services perspective, this is really where you might want to start partnering with a third-party company that can offer advanced security awareness training, whether again, it's KnowBe4, or there's a couple of other companies that are coming out there on the market now. And then from a consulting and reporting services standpoint, because of the higher security focus, the consulting needs to kind of move in that direction as well. So, providing consulting around compliance and enforcement, application control, helping them create their security policies, putting security controls and recommendations in place and enforcing those. And then moving these into quarterly executive reviews. They're a medium to high risk customer. There's a lot of changes going on in the threat landscape today, so you definitely want to be meeting with them at least a quarterly basis to kind of make sure that the protection measures that you're put in place are working and that nothing else has popped up that you need to know about so that you can adjust. And then support services standpoint, again, this will really depend on the philosophy of your program. You can continue to keep it as kind of time material based or pull it off of the block, or maybe this is your top end program. Maybe you decide, well, I'm just going to have 2 programs. I'm going to have my essentials program for all my low risk customers, and then I'm going to have my advanced program from all my medium to high risk programs. And maybe for your advanced, all the supports included. That is probably the one part that from an a la carte methodology, do what works for you and what works for your support standpoint, because that doesn't really impact the overall protection of the program. That's really a reactive response. So I have it down there as time material or block, but again, if this is your top end program, you may make it all inclusive. And then for very high risk businesses, your government, high end and large medical, banking, where your data carries a high degree of sensitivity and value out there on the dark web, this is where you could look at introducing one of 2 comprehensive programs. So, I have just I don't want to say a basic comprehensive, because as you can see, it's not a basic program, or a comprehensive program where we're including the services of a third-party MSSP. And basically what we're doing here at this level is we're transferring the bulk of the risk, the majority of the risk, away from the business owner, and you're taking it on and putting it on your shoulders. So, enhancing some of the security services at the comprehensive level, where it's threat endpoint protection, but we're activating the threat hunting, maybe doing some external vulnerability management. From a backup perspective, again, high risk organizations, we're putting in some redundancy or failover planning. From a consulting and reporting services standpoint, moving towards monthly executive business reviews, if you can swing it, again, depending on the amount of customers you have and how many you're supporting. Monthly is ideal because they're high risk customers and are probably, well, they would be paying you the most, but at least no less than quarterly at this program level. And then from a support services standpoint, this is where really everything would be included in the monthly price from a reactive support element. So all your help desk calls, your emergency calls, your reactive vendor management calls, that type of thing. And again, depending on your customers and depending on their security needs, their security requirements and what they need from you, you may not have the tool sets, you may not have the skill sets, you may not have the people. And so if you recognize that there's that gap between what your customers need and what you're able to provide, there is nothing wrong with going out and partnering with an MSSP who can white label and help support you in the background of that, because an MSSP can offer a lot of additional services that maybe you're not prepared to do so at this point. Maybe they have a SOC, SIM management, and you see the listing of higher end services there. So again, not expecting you to move to be and classify yourself as an MSSP, but there is nothing wrong with working with a third-party company. They're not there to take your customers. They're there to work with you, support you behind the scenes. You are still the face of the relationship with that customer, but they can really help to elevate your comprehensive program if you have a couple of those types of customers that need it. So we're taking this layered approach to security because the unfortunate truth is that trying to secure and protect against every single known vulnerability out there is a Herculean task in and of itself. So it's important to educate your customers that when you're implementing your new programs, you have to operate under the assumption that nothing you're going to do can guarantee that 100% operational safety. That is why we have to include multiple tool sets and new processes at each layer surrounding your customer's data. Because again, keep going back to, it's not so much around risk prevention. You really can't state any longer that you can prevent threats from happening because, again, nothing is 100% guaranteed. But it is increasingly becoming more and more about planning in resiliency and ensuring that you have the structure and the plan in place so that a customer can recover quickly and efficiently from an attack. So it's about minimizing the amount of downtime and mitigating the impact of that downtime when a client does get attacked. Once you've kind of mapped out your programs and your program structure and where everything lies, then we can start looking at pricing. All right, so when we talk about pricing strategy, it isn't so much about where, today I'm going to tell you what should be your specific price per program or what is the average price per user or the price per device. But I want to focus instead on the theory when it comes to determining pricing for your new security programs. And that pricing theory that we use is the cost up plus margin approach to pricing. And so what does this, cost up and margin approach to pricing look like? So from a high level standpoint, a program's monthly price is determined by, basically tallying up all of your MSP costs, applying a specific margin percentage goal to it, and then that works to get you your final price. And so looking at, the costs that an MSP needs to cover by their program pricing, we're really going to be talking about covering 3 sets of costs today: your software costs, your technician costs, and then any other costs. And then when looking at software costs, these are the per unit costs of the different software solutions that are going to be used to deliver the services that are basically defined by your program. So you define your program first because that's going to help us with our pricing. And really in the whole pricing scheme of things, software costs are typically the smallest component of a program's overall costs. And then when we look at the technician costs, these are the costs for the engineers that are going to be used to helping to manage and support your programs. And typically, direct labor, that's the largest component of your program's overall cost. So in order to mitigate the impact direct labor has on the overall pricing, you're going to want to make sure that you're optimizing your technicians the best you can, making sure that you're leveraging the automation and standardization that's available across all of your tool sets. But with your technician costs, here we're looking at, the fully burdened cost per engineer. We're looking at the activities they must perform manually to deliver a lot of the different line items outlined in your programs. We're looking at the length of time that's needed to complete these different tasks. And then if you're the type of MSP and you've built out a program like a fully managed or like a comprehensive program, what is that unpredictable, what is that forecasted amount that needs to be budgeted for from a reactive standpoint? We don't need to make sure that we build that time in too, because if something goes wrong in a comprehensive or a fully managed program, you can't go back and bill additionally if something happens to that client's network. So we need to build in that time as well. And then when we look at other costs that might need to be incorporated into the program, here we're looking at maybe some consulting time, professional services time. Is there any hardware or equipment that you need to install to really deliver any of those line items that you have in your program matrix? And then once all the costs have been identified, then you want to determine, what's your margin goal percentage going to be that you would like to earn in your programs. And, that margin goal percentage that you're building in depends on a few things as well. So here we're looking at your organizational overhead costs, obviously the market location that you're in. And here we're also talking about including a risk premium. And this is for the security specific specialization that you are now providing and the level and the severity of the risk that you're assuming on behalf of the customer. Because I keep saying this, it's all about risk. It's about who's going to be responsible for assuming and carrying that risk. And if the customer is willing to share more equitably in that risk ownership, then we don't need to put in as high of a premium. But if the customer, totally wants to offload all the risk over to you and you're going to take all that risk on, so we're talking about a comprehensive program, an advanced program at this level, then the risk premium needs to be higher because you're taking on more of the risk, and that's going to make the monthly price that you charge going to be higher. And then if you think of this risk premium from a marketing perspective, with these new programs, you can effectively look at rebranding yourself as a type of security specialist. Again, I'm not saying MSSP, but you can still say that you are a security specialist. You've been doing this stuff already. We're just putting it into a new format, a new structure, and repackaging it up. But we know, just by human nature, that specialists are more highly valued and they're more revered than just generalists. Think of your own life. Think of how you make your own decisions. If you're experiencing heart problems, you don't want to be dealing with your family doctor. Your family doctor is going to refer you so that you can work with a cardiologist that deals exclusively with the heart and only works with heart patients. Cardiologists, because of the specialty, they charge more. And because they charge more, they generally make more than family doctors. And so you want to start thinking of your MSP in the same way. You are risk mitigation specialists now. And specialists can always demand a higher price than generalists due to the unique specialization that you're able to bring to the table that a customer can't get from maybe another generic MSP in their area. And again, not saying you need to call yourself an MSSP, but looking at those programs from earlier, you are likely already delivering a lot of these services today. Like I said, we're just kind of bundling them up in a new structure and a new standardized way. We're adjusting some price points so that you can market yourself to help differentiate yourself and your organization from your competitors and command a higher price than those that may not be positioning their MSP in this manner. And if you look at any sort of websites for MSPs, many MSPs still have very bland, generic websites that are out there that don't even have a hint that they do anything related to security. So because of this redesign, MSPs should be incorporating a risk premium as part of their overall margin goals for each program level. And so then when you look at these two factors together, your cost plus your margin, this helps you to set the final price that you should be charging to your customers moving forward. And maybe some of you are sitting there, hearing me and you're like, well, what should my gross margin percentage be? How do I determine what that goal is? So, looking at what our best-in-class MSPs are doing or what they're aiming for in terms of gross margin targets, we're seeing it anywhere in the 60% plus range. And then if we break this down by program level, at that minimum viable security, that essentials program level, we're seeing anywhere from 50 to 80%. At the advanced or the comprehensive level, we're seeing it anywhere from 67 to 80%. So because at the advanced or the comprehensive level, you're building in a higher gross margin because, again, you're taking on the lion's share of the risk at those levels. And because you're taking on more of the risk, you really do have every right to build in a higher risk premium at those levels, where at the essentials program level, the risk is being shared a little bit more equitably, so that margin goal, should you choose, can be a little bit lower. So we are going to go into the costing calculator. There's the copy of the costing calculator is available for download. But before we head into that, to review how to use it to price out a program, just a couple of cautionary notes that I wanted to bring up as we kind of work through the pricing exercise. First off, don't price based on what your competition is charging. And I know that's difficult to do. You don't want to be the cheapest in your market. If you have listened to anything that Paul Green says from Paul Green's MSP Marketing, he actually advocates and he works exclusively with MSPs. He actually says you need to be the most expensive in your market. So maybe not go to that point, but don't try to be the cheapest in your market. I feel that MSPs have done a real disservice to themselves by always focusing on the price and what their competitors are charging for their programs. And they've because of that, they've created pricing commoditization for themselves in the marketplace because of this approach. You know, MSPs, I think, have almost trained business owners to not look at anything that's said in the proposal, but just to look at the last page, you know, kind of where the price is located. And I don't find that they're doing a good enough job educating and communicating on how they're different in terms of their overall approach. But by specializing in security and bringing a security angle into the program development and marketing activities, this will allow you to differentiate yourselves from your competitors and focus on the benefits of the program that are provided and the outcomes that are provided instead of the price. Because just looking at that spreadsheet, there are a lot of different features and different variables that go into the program design process. So in a lot of cases, you know, if you're trying to compare it to a customer or to a competitor, you're not getting a true apples to apples comparison. And so the MSP really, again, comes back to this education component. An MSP needs to educate the prospect on why they can't match a competitor's price or why they are more expensive than another MSP in the area. And don't price based on what you think your customers can afford. You know, a lot of MSPs, they're scared to have that security conversation with their customers. And I find that they pre-object a lot of the time on behalf of their customers because they know that by implementing a layered approach to security, you know it's going to cost more. And so they go ahead and they end up reducing their prices to meet some preconceived budget that they think the customer has without actually standing firm and being confident in what they're offering and educating them on why the programs are structured this way. You also don't want to price based on the individual device. You know, you want to price by user instead. And when we go into the pricing calculator, we do, from an internal perspective, have to focus on determining a cost per device. But this is just for us to determine our internal costs and our internal price. We don't want you positioning that per device cost in that way, because you want to take, you know, the total cost of all of your devices, you know, the desktops, your servers, your network gear, and then we're going to divide it by the number of users in the organization and then present a per user price to that decision maker. Because if you think about it from a positioning and from a messaging standpoint, we're protecting users with our programs. You know, we're educating users with your program. So you want the focus of your activities to be on the users and not the technical devices and the technical tidbits in the back end that you happen to need to manage. People are the most expensive asset of any organization. So your goal is to do what you can to keep them safe, protected, productive, and working. Also, make sure you understand what goes into your fully burdened labor rate. And you can look at your fully burdened labor rate as the full cost of an hour's worth of work of your technician. And so we're looking at things like, obviously, their hourly wage. We're looking at their payroll taxes, vacation pay, health insurance, supplies, meals, training, and any other benefits or expenses that are related to that individual's employment. And if you're not sure how to calculate this, you can easily find it if you Google it. There's so many different calculators there. Or, you know, obviously your accountant, your bookkeeper can work with you on that as well. Also, in terms of labor, you want to be honest in the amount of direct labor and human resource time that's actually needed to deliver your programs. I know back in the day when I was an account manager and I'd be going through the program design and pricing exercise with partners, they would try to reduce the labor in the labor component of the pricing worksheet to try and reduce their price. And skimping on time estimates to reduce that monthly price so that it fits into this customer budget, that is only going to hurt your profitability and it's only going to hurt your revenue levels. So if you find that there's too much time that's needed to be included into your program to deliver some of the manual activities and it's inflating your monthly price, then I encourage you to, you know, go and listen to a lot of my other nerds colleagues boot camps and look and see where automation and operational efficiency could be better achieved. And then I think the biggest pricing mistake that I see that we want to help you avoid is partners that neglect to implement price increases. You want to create a cadence and you want to set a precedence when it comes to price increases. Your costs go up every year, whether it's your business costs or having to deal with general inflation increases. And so to maintain your profitability levels, you need to build in price increases into your annual contracts to help offset your increases in costs. Or if you determine that you're spending more time than initially thought at the beginning of a contract to support a particular customer's network, you want to use the renewal opportunity to adjust their monthly program pricing so that you can level set their pricing moving forward. Because by not implementing regular price increases, your revenues, your profitability is going to continue to erode year over year. And that's just going to end up giving you a negative impact down the line on your overall business valuation levels. So the best approach is to handling price increases if you've never done any sort of price increase before with your customers. One, you could just tear off the Band-Aid, just bring it up at their next executive review meeting, tell them that you're going to start implementing an annual price increase, which, will be effective, whatever the rate is, 2 to 5%, depending on the rate of inflation, because you need to offset your growing costs. Or what I think is the better approach, price increases generally go over better if the customer can see that they're getting increased value in exchange for the monthly price increase. And so that's why implementing a new program structure, kind of like what we're talking about today, along with the price increase works really well, because then it's not a price increase for the sake of a price increase, but you're introducing kind of a whole new suite of security services to provide better threat protection to your customer. And that is why their monthly price is changing, while you work to kind of standardize your customers across the new security program offerings. And in one of my office hours, actually, I heard a great idea that one of our partners over in the UK uses on how they handle price increases. And it was in all my years, it was kind of mind-blowing and so simple but perfect in its execution. And so what they do is they introduce new security bundles every year, and they version it like cars. So they have their 2021 security suite, they have their 2022 security suite, and all customers have to be on the latest security bundle. And again, I think this is such a fantastic approach, and it's a fantastic approach for so many reasons. It keeps every customer on the same program with the same feature sets. So from an onboarding and from a service delivery standpoint, it's easy to provide support to their customers because the tech stack is the same across the board. Because they, in their opinion, and that's my opinion of all of you guys are the experts. And so by having your 2021, 2022 security bundles, it allows you the flexibility and the luxury to change out products if you happen to find better versions, or it allows you to introduce new products if you feel that the threat landscape has changed and it warrants it. And you don't need to get your customers' permission to make the changes they need in terms of the program design, because each year the new security bundle is automatically applied and the new pricing goes into effect. Because again, there's talking to partners, when I was in my old role, talking about program design and program development, I would always get this comment back or this pushback that, well, I have to go talk to my customers first. I have to go get their buy-in first. And by implementing kind of this car version of security bundles, I think works so well because the customers then understand the arrangement right up front, and they just accept it as part of the business, the part of the relationship, and they don't question it. So really don't be afraid to implement price increases. If you've never done this before, your customers are likely expecting it from you. They're just keeping their mouth shut. And your good, decent customers, they're going to understand. And if they don't, then they may not be a client that you really want to keep on as a client in the foreseeable future anyway. All right, so now we're going to go into how we review or how we're going to price an essentials security program using our costing calculator. So just a reminder of what our essentials program looks like. You know, this is, again, your minimum viable program that all customers should be a part of. You know, at least all your low risk rating types of customers. This really works to now replace our reactive programs or maybe any a la carte programs that you might have been selling previously. And because the reactive or the responsive or the a la carte, those tiers are no longer a viable option because it opens up too much unnecessary risk to the customer and to yourself as the MSP. And so when we get into the calculator, there's basically, as you recall, 3 sets of costs that we want to consider. So we have our software costs, which is really everything in purple. We have our labor costs, which is really everything in green. And then we have our support costs, and in this case, it's blue. And in our essentials program, the blue is going to be billed separately because this is just an essentials program. So your help desk calls, emails, chat, everything is going to be billed outside of the monthly fee at whatever your regular time material rates are, or you can just sell them a block and then you can pull from the block. All right. So again, this copy is available for download. So how do we price out an essentials program? So before starting this exercise, you want to make sure that you have all of your invoices handy, that you have all of your contracts handy, so that you know what all of your software licensing costs are. And so you'll notice there's tabs along the bottom. So we have our line card tab, we have our selections tab, we have our quote tab. So here we're starting at the line card tab, and we're going to enter in all of our individual per device, per user costs. So in the line card tab, first you want to input, you know, whatever your average fully burdened labor rate is. I've put $50 in here as an average, but it's really going to depend on what your geography is and what your market is and what your skill sets are of the individuals. So this may change, but I've been told by partners generally it's anywhere from 40 to say like $65, $75. So I'm just going to put 50 in here. Local currency, this is the drop down where you can select the currency of your region. And you're going to see in this calculator, there are some cells that are gray. Actually, there's a lot of cells that are gray, and there's a few cells that are white. So for the gray cells, they allow you to do direct inputs. This is where you can change the names of the programs, the headers, the service and software options to really being anything that you want them to be. And the white areas, these are areas with formulas, you know, where the cell gets automatically calculated based on whatever the direct inputs are. So these white cells are locked and cannot be modified. Only the agent column in the header is the only one that's locked. Anything else can be modified based on your program, based on your tech stack, based on your requirements, or how you've built them out. So there's really 3 parts of the calculator that we're going to be focusing on today. So we have our software costs. These are your, again, your per device, your per user costs that we're going to be filling in. We have our monthly management time. So this is our budgeted labor time in minutes for your program, you know, based on your average labor rate. So we've included 3 buckets of labor that we typically see included in a security program. So we have our preventative maintenance, we have our remediation, and then we have our consulting time. And then we have our other costs. And this can really be used for things like hardware costs that you might be including in your program. So here I'm really thinking like if say your backup system that you deployed is Datto. A lot of the times Datto has an appliance that you have to install. Or maybe from a firewall security perspective, you're using Barracuda and there's an appliance for that. So this is really where you would put kind of those monthly appliance costs for that. And then in column B, this is where you can see that you can change the name of the program to whatever you want it to be. And you actually have the ability to create pricing for up to 4 different programs in this tab. These cells aren't locked, so you can rename them whatever you want. Here, I have named one of the program headings Essentials. And so then starting at the software cost section. So again, this is where we're adding in the software costs of all the software that's going to be installed to support our Essentials program. So looking at the software license that we need to include in the agent column, both the proactive server line and the network management line. This is where we want to add in the cost of your RMM monitoring license, or if you use N-Central, your N-Central monitoring license for each server and each network device that you have. Then in the agent column, this is where we're looking at the proactive desktop line or workstation line. This is where we add in the cost, again, of your RMM agent or your N-Central monitoring license agent for the desktop. But I'm also including the cost of NetPath on the workstation, which supports kind of the SaaS application availability health monitoring feature. And so that's why that price is a little bit higher, because I'm including the monitoring license plus the NetPath alliance. And then if you are offering, or if this is a Microsoft 365 user, then you would also include the cost of that into the agent, desktop agent as well. So you might have to kind of double up on some of these columns. And then looking at the AV or the EDR column, this is where we're adding in the costs of AV or EDR, depending on which product you decide to go with, in the proactive server line and in the proactive desktop line. In this example, I was just using the cost of AV Defender, but if you want to use EDR, because that's what you're mandating as the minimum software in your Essentials program, then just put your EDR costs in there. And then whatever risk assessment software you might be using, whether it's our risk intelligence or some other risk assessment software, this is where you would add in the licensing cost of your preferred solution that you're going to be using at the Essentials level. And then for backup licenses, this is where we want to add in the costs for, our documents backup for desktop. If there's a server there, put in the server license costs for backup. Again, if they're a Microsoft 365 user, put in the backup cost for the license there as well, if it makes sense. And then for email spam filtering, add in the cost of your mail or your web protection software. If you use MailAssure, put your MailAssure licensing cost in there. And then lastly, in the Passportal end user license, put the price in there and any 2FA software that you might be using as well. And so column K, once we put in all of our software licenses, this is where those total software costs get added up for every server, network, device that we're going to be monitoring, as well as each workstation. And just a quick note here on the software pricing, I highly recommend not using your discounted rates that maybe you've received from your vendor when you're inputting your software costs. Really put in your MSRP pricing instead. And the reason I say this is, a lot of the times, if you got significant discounts, it's because there was significant volume that went along with it. You got the price because you bought a lot of it. But for some reason, if you needed to reduce licenses, a lot of the times that's going to forfeit your vendor discounts. And so you don't want that eating into your margins. So if you have vendor discounts, perfect, great. Look at this as gravy. Who cares if it actually overinflates your overall contract margin? I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I would just rather err on the side of being more conservative and putting in the highest unit cost for the smallest volume tier when building out my pricing. So if there is a change in your discounts, you won't be as negatively impacted by it. And then start, adding in your monthly management time. And again, this is all in minutes. So looking at column L, this is our preventative maintenance. This is the routine maintenance that's needed for each server, each network item, and each desktop that's supposed to be included in the program. And the totals that you're seeing entered here are just averages of what partners have told me over the years. But the idea is that this is manual time over and above the automation. So you really want to automate as much of your maintenance as you can so that we can minimize the labor component as much as we can. So if you're a highly automated firm, your averages may be lower than what we have here. So from a server perspective, putting 45 minutes in per month for preventative maintenance. The way I've kind of broken this down is 30 minutes a month for the server maintenance, and then another 15 minutes a month for the backup and doing maintenance on the backup in case, maybe a backup failed or you need to investigate it. So that whole total, I put in 45 minutes. Networking, I've put in 15 minutes a month. And this is really to make any adjustments to settings on routers or firewall switches, Wi-Fi, the VPN management. And then desktop, I put in 7 minutes per month. And that's really just for patch cleanup, device optimization, that type of thing. So again, these are just, kind of samples. Make it reflective of how much time it actually takes you and your team to do your monthly checklisted items on a server, a network item, and the workstation. And then remediation time, column M. There is no built-in remediation time included in this program. Any help desk calls, emergency calls, vendor management, anything that's reactive in nature that comes up unexpectedly, that's considered out of scope. And so we're just going to bill that over and above whatever your time material rates are, or again, tack on a block, and then you can always pull that time off the block each month. And then you have your consulting time. And then you'll notice that under each program level, there's extra line items, blank line items, room to add in optional elements. So here I'm looking at lines 34 to 38. So line 34, kind of column N, this is where for your monthly risk assessment, and this is really based on the software that you're using to conduct your scans, plus the time to prepare and deliver your reports. So I've kind of budgeted about 30 minutes a month for that. And then line 35, your basic training services. This is again to deliver, your basic security awareness training. So again, I'm kind of thinking here 2 hours a year. That equates to 120 minutes a year, which is about 10 minutes a month. So that's where that number comes from. And then line 36 is our semi-annual executive review. So this is the time to prepare your reports, plus your time to meet twice a year. So the way I've kind of broken this down is 2 hours to prepare, plus 1 hour to meet each month. So kind of 6 hours in total for the year, which is 360 minutes a year. Divide that by 12, works out to being 30 minutes per month. And so that is how we got those values in column N under the consulting tab. And then in column Q, there's no other costs in this program to consider because it's all essential related items. We don't have any appliances associated with any of the products that we use. But if you are implementing a feature and there is some sort of additional appliance cost, like your backup or your security appliance, you can add in the monthly cost there. And then column R, this gives us our total costs, which is our software costs and our labor costs across the device. And then column S, this is where we enter in our price per device or service. And this is where we start to play around with the price so that we can really get the desired margin that we want. And you will see that the margin goal percentage goals in column U. So there's average prices that are already entered, kind of when you go in and get this calculator, when we email it out to everybody, because I guess there's some issues with the download. So everybody will have this emailed to them. So there's going to be some average prices already in there, but based on your margin goal percentage, the prices in column S, they're going to probably change. So again, at the essentials level, our best-in-class MSPs, they really do aim for anywhere between 50 to 80% as a target gross margin goal. For this example, I amended the prices to achieve a 60% margin goal across the board. So although you need to kind of play around with the prices at the device level to kind of get that 60% margin goal that you can see in column U, just to remind you, this isn't what we're quoting to the customer. This is all internal calculations only. So to reach 60% margin on our server plus backup, we need to have a price of $239 a month. To reach a 60% margin on the network, we need to have a price of $40 per month per network device. And to reach a 60% margin on our desktops, which also includes backup, we need to have a price of $41 per desktop per month. And then once you've entered in all of your software costs and your labor costs and your desired margins in the line card tab, we then want to move to the selections tab. And in this area, it says proactive program here. This is our essentials program. And on this tab, this is where we want to enter in the number of devices that you're going to be monitoring and managing in this essentials program for this customer. So for illustrative purposes, I'm saying that this customer has 20 employees. So we've added in 20 desktops, and they have 1 firewall and 1 server. So you'll see the device count there of 1, 1, and 20. And then where it says down below, monthly risk assessment scans, basic security training, annual executive review, or semi-annual, depending on how you've structured it, enter just 1 in each of these cells, because that's basically just turning that line item on and to signify that we're including it in the overall costing. And then you go into the quotes tab. And so don't worry about completing this top header that you're seeing, because again, we don't want you using this in front of the actual customer. You know, you're only using this to really help you configure a customer quote to show your prospect, you know, which is you're just gonna take this and add it into your own proposal template. So again, this is strictly an internal tool. And so you can see that we get a monthly cost of $1,246 based on 20 users, 1 firewall, and 1 server. And you can also see that this confirms our overall contract margin of 60%, like we wanted it to be. And then we just kind of have to do some manual math here at this point to get the price per user. We're just dividing our $1,246 by 20, so it comes out to $62.30 per user per month. So, but again, I have some caveats here. So this is based on our Enable US pricing. It's our MSRP pricing without any discounts, and it's at our highest tier pricing. So if you're using other software to deliver any of these features, then obviously your pricing is going to be a bit different than what we're showing here. And this is also admittedly incomplete pricing because we're missing some software licensing costs around, you know, whatever you're using to conduct your monthly security assessment, you know, whatever you're using to enforce 2FA, whatever you're doing to deliver your security training. If you are implementing, or if this is an M365 user, we're missing those licensing costs and the backup of those licensing costs. So this will adjust or possibly raise the software licensing cost section a bit further in the calculator. And again, this doesn't include any reactive labor. You know, there's no help desk cost, no emergency cost, no vendor management. So you're going to want to make sure that in your contract, you make the customer aware of this. This isn't being promoted as an all-inclusive program. You know, this is a per user price of $62 per user, and then there's going to be additional costs depending on whether that reactive help desk element is. So again, maybe we tack on a block of hours to make it easier that way. But given the fact that we're providing some pretty comprehensive monitoring and preventative maintenance as part of this program, hopefully the reactive element won't be as much. And again, although we're costing everything on a per device basis, when we communicate this with our customers, we position it as a per user. You know, we're just taking the total cost across all of our devices, dividing it by the number of users, and then we're presenting that as a per user price to the decision maker. And again, in this example, we're just reviewing how to price out kind of the core minimum viable program standard today, that essentials program. But the theory is going to remain the same for any program that you want to build out. So for any program, you're going to want to determine your feature set. So take that Excel spreadsheet of the different program matrix, get that all mapped out the way that you like, determine your tech stack that's going to be needed to implement and deliver the services that make up the program. And then you need to determine, how much labor is then needed to deliver the services, especially on the preventative maintenance and the consulting side of things. And then make a determination as to what your required margin goal percentage will be. Again, making sure we're including that risk premium of the program as well that you're taking on behalf of that client. Again, the more risk that you're taking on, so if we're looking at an advanced or comprehensive program, the higher the margin goal that you should build in. All right, we'll get back into the swing of things with part 3, which is the last part of today's session that's going to focus on how do you position and sell kind of your new security bundles. And we're going to review, some good approaches that you can take to address and overcome some of the most common sales objections that you're likely going to hear. So you've crafted your new programs, you have your new pricing in place, you're ready to go. Now what do you do? I would start by going after all of your low-hanging fruit first. Make a plan to reach out to every single one of your existing clients that are on a non-standard program, so you can talk to them about converting each of them into one of your new standard plans. Not only needed from obviously a revenue generation and sales opportunity perspective, but it's also needed more and more from an insurance risk mitigation and liability perspective. If something should happen to one of your clients and they end up getting breached, you need to make sure that you've done your due diligence and that you've taken all of the necessary precautions to elevate the protection standards, because you need to make sure that you are properly protected from any liability or harm to your reputation. So go back to that customer segmentation exercise, that risk rating exercise that you completed earlier, and maybe aim to start with your medium or your high risk customers first and present to them your version of the advanced or comprehensive program, depending on what your top program is for your highest risk customers. And as you're starting out with this new program philosophy, it's best to engage with your existing clients first, for a couple of good reasons. They already know you, they know your organization, they know the quality of work that you do, you've built a relationship with them and hopefully this partnership. And so you can practice your pitch on them. They can act as your guinea pigs and as your sounding board on your sales approach and messaging, and hopefully give you some really good constructive feedback for when you do begin selling to organizations that really don't know you at all. They can help prepare you for the various objections that you're going to hear, so that you can practice how to address with that pushback, because you are going to get pushback, especially when speaking about the new pricing that you're introducing. And you can use them to kind of really help iron out all of your technical deliverables then in your onboarding process. You can use these customers to provide, real world training for your techs and for your service desk staff, especially if you've introduced some new technologies into your tech stack that are new to you and your team. And then from a marketing perspective, you want to generate as many case studies, testimonials, reviews that you can, so that you can post this to your website, post it to your social media, because that's what you're going to need to kind of help promote your organization and sell and get leads from new clients and prospects, when you're ready for that part. So line up those meetings, those executive business review meetings, and make a point to bring to that meeting, maybe some sort of security report that discusses the changing threat landscape, that Sonic Wall report, or there's all sorts of different reports that are out there that you can bring. And this is information that you can use to help educate, again, your customer on what's happening in the world today, if they happen to be living under a rock, that works to help justify the changes that you're implementing. And be prepared to bring your new master services agreement with you that outlines your new program that you would like to enroll them in, and bring with that the new monthly pricing that they're going to be subject to. And, be prepared that if they're not ready to sign your new master services agreement, that you have some sort of hold harmless letter or some sort of risk acceptance letter or limited liability waiver that they then need to sign that clearly outlines what the consequences will be should they become attacked or infected or ransomed. And if you're looking for some additional instruction on how to have those risk conversations with clients, there is a really good video in the MSP Institute that you can go and watch. It was done by our VP of Security when we were SolarWinds, Tim Brown, and it was called, I believe it was called Helping Customers Evaluate Risk. So although we're no longer part of SolarWinds, Tim's training and expertise is still extremely relevant to our MSP partners. So just some homework that I encourage you to go check out. And so although I'm suggesting you target existing clients first because of the relationship that you built with them, this isn't to say that you're not going to get pushback from them because your customers are likely not going to want changes to their programs just kind of thrust upon them, especially if these changes are going to result in a higher monthly bill. But with proper preparation and practice, you can present to them your rationale and provide a good response to their objections. So in addition to the couple of objections that we've already discussed at the beginning, what are some other, most anticipated sales objections that you will likely hear as you're going out and talking to each of your customers? You're probably going to hear, that sounds way too expensive. And you have to anticipate that you're going to get this type of objection from your customers, especially as you begin talking to them about your new security programs. So you are going to want to role play and practice how you're going to want to respond when you hear this one. And a good approach is to demonstrate ROI to the customer and help them understand what the true costs of a ransomware attack is to their business. Because the monthly cost of your new security programs is probably going to be peanuts compared to the customer getting breached, having their data taken or unrecoverable or potentially published or sold on the dark web, and they potentially could be put out of business if there was any collateral damage and loss of reputation that occurs. So how can we demonstrate ROI during a sales conversation? Again, as most businesses already have an MSP managing their network, the ROI conversation, it's no longer about illustrating, kind of the cost of downtime of having an unmanaged network. But downtime these days is likely going to come from some sort of ransomware attack, due to an underprotected network that likely resulted from an employee clicking on something that they shouldn't have. So when trying to educate your customers about your security bundles and they're flinching at the cost of it, take them through a simple ROI to help them understand why you're recommending what you're recommending, to help them see what the true cost of a security attack or a breach is on their business. And if anybody attended our Empower event earlier this year, I stole this slide from our head security nerd, Lewis's Pope's presentation that he delivered on security and ransomware during that event. And this information comes from a Coveware Consulting 2020 ransomware report. And according to that report, the average ransomware payment in Q3 of 2020 was $233,000. And that was basically up 31% from Q2 2020. But more importantly, the average length of downtime from a ransomware attack was 19 days. And that was up 19% from Q2 2020. And so that's really the biggest benefit of your new security programs is you need to anticipate that your customers will be breached or they will experience some sort of ransomware attack. But when they do, your job is to get that customer back up and running and back to business in a short amount of time as possible. And it can only be achieved with a well-architected security program that's going to allow you to meet your customers' return to operations objectives. And I'm going to make a big leap of faith that they're going to tell you that 19 days is probably way too long for them to have their doors closed and not conducting business. So using these types of stats to help justify the changes you had to make to your program offerings and to explain why it is now more expensive than what they're used to paying currently. So looking at the surface costs that would be incurred when trying to recover from a ransomware attack. With an average labor rate in my example here of $125 an hour, the remediation bill alone would be $19,000. And that's at $125 an hour times 8 hours a day, excuse me, times 19 average days of downtime. And this would just be the bill that you would have to send them for your emergency services to try and get them back online and back to normal after an attack. But I know from speaking to many MSPs over the years, you likely won't charge this full amount, as you're likely going to provide probably a heavy discount. There could be some guilt there that you might be feeling towards the customer because they likely tensions are going to be high. They likely might be blaming you for the attack, and you're going to be doing whatever you can to try and salvage that relationship moving forward. But the bill that you send is just one of the costs that the customer would be incurring. So your job is to educate them on what are those other underlying costs that they could potentially be hit with. And some of those costs aren't readily as measurable. But there could be the cost to pay the ransom fee. If for some reason you aren't able to recover their data because they're not in a program that you recommended that would allow you to do this, and if the customer didn't have a quality backup, the only option they have left is to try and pay that ransom to see if they can get their data back. And we now know, we've heard the stories, that that's not always 100% guaranteed. And so going back to that Coveware report, the average ransomware payment was $233,000. And there was a Selfless ransomware report that came out that said 8% of businesses who paid that ransom didn't even get all of their data back. So paying the ransom nowadays doesn't necessarily mean that the bad guys are going to play nice and be fair and actually give you your data back. You also need to consider the cost incurred as a result of the forced downtime of the employees. So here you want to calculate, those soft costs, with the loss of productivity for those that might be unable to work while their computers are offline or encrypted. And my role, my world was sales, so I'm going to use sales team as an example. So if you consider the downtime costs of just a sales team, if this business was impacted and these sales employees didn't have access to their files or to their notes for 19 days, and say that maybe there's 5 people that happen to make up the sales department, that hourly, and say each of their hourly rate is $50 an hour. So 1 hour of downtime for a 5-person sales team would be $250 an hour, right? And if the downtime experience was the full 19 days, the downtime cost for that would then be $38,000. So $250 an hour times 8 hours a day times 19 days. So just based on these few factors alone, we're already at $57,000, which is $19,000 for the actual bill that you're going to send them to recover and restore the customer, hopefully, and $38,000 from the lost productivity experience for the 19 days that those salespeople, the doors were closed and they possibly couldn't work. And then if you go through all of that and you still can't get their data back and you're forced to pay the ransom, and in that Coveware report, it said the average downtime was 233,000, or for the payment, sorry. There was a medium number there, and they said the medium ransomware attack was 110,000. So I'm going to go with the lesser of the two. And so now we're at $167,000. And that's just really all of them due to having an underprotected network and not listening to what you're recommending. But then, there's other potential opportunity costs as well that need to be considered that can really push this number higher. So we're looking at liability costs. These are the potential costs of fines or penalties that might be levied as a result of the breach or data loss, depending on whatever the industry is that the customer resides in. There's going to be all of those post-breach costs that the organization would have to incur to kind of move forward from the breach. There could be cyber insurance premium increases because the customer got hacked and had to make a claim. There's all of those communication and notification costs that need to be advised and sent out to customers, letting them know of the breach. There might be increased costs in protection coverage from your insurance company to mitigate future events. There could be consulting costs. There'll definitely be employee security training costs, to kind of teach them what to not look out for so they don't cause this type of breach again. There could be collateral damage. This breach could potentially impact and cause harm to other organizations that might be in the customer's supply chain, and that could have lasting damage, which could lead to some sort of reputation loss. Customers, upon hearing of a breach, they might lose faith in that business, and it could leave that business to become, they lose all their customers and they could possibly become extinct. And this is all, again, because they wouldn't put in the right protection measures up front and pay a little bit more each month to properly protect themselves and their staff as you have recommended. And then you, as their MSP, by not enforcing these new standards and allowing the customer to kind of continue on as is. Another objection that you probably will likely hear, I can get it cheaper elsewhere, or my competitor is only charging X. This is likely, I fear, not the case because they're probably not comparing apples to apples. My fear here with this objection is that the competitor's program is likely missing key features and services from their offering, which is resulting in significant gaps in the overall protection coverage. Because remember, there's those 5 key layers that need to be addressed when it comes to properly protecting an organization's critical data. So remember, we have that perimeter level, we have the internet level, we have the end user, we have the application, and we have the device level. So when developing, a comprehensive cybersecurity program, all 5 layers need to be addressed. And each layer requires its own specific set of security tool sets and services for proper protection coverage. So if a competitor is saying that they can deliver a cybersecurity program for far less than what you're charging them, I would really be suspect as to what is actually being done across all those 5 layers. Or they're severely underestimating the labor component involved, or they're sacrificing significant margin and their overall profitability levels just to win that deal, which we all know is not sustainable in the long term to building a profitable business. Because remember, our best-in-class MSPs, they're generating anywhere from 60 to 80% gross margin on their cybersecurity programs. And these programs should cost more than what you're delivering today because you should be charging a premium for your security programs because you're taking on that lion's share of the risk and responsibility for their data. And so you shouldn't be afraid to charge appropriately for that because it is quite a responsibility that you are assuming and undertaking. Another objection you might hear, can I just remove some services? It's a little bit high and it's not quite fitting into my budget. So obviously just another take on the it's too expensive objection. Really, my short answer, no. You don't want to allow customers the opportunity to pick away and remove services so that you can better fit into their perceived technology budget. And I know I'm getting on a little bit of a soapbox here. Yes, there is going to be sticker shock, especially if you haven't gone through an exercise like this before. But I feel it's really important that you can't let your customers dictate their own path to support. That is why we're recommending that baseline essentials program or having a program like that acts as your minimum viable security program that covers all 5 layers. So we're still offering the basic protection that you and your customer need to mitigate risk and to bounce back from that ransomware attack. It's really important that you set a floor as your minimum tier that you will allow customers to enroll in, and don't sell below that. Don't strip out services that's going to reduce the protection coverage of that minimum viable program. Because if you begin to erode your minimum tier to fit some sort of preconceived price point, you're opening that door to increased risk and liability for yourself as the MSP. Because not only are there costs to the customer by refusing to elevate their security posture, and we kind of went over those costs a little bit ago when we spoke about that ROI exercise, but looking at that other side of the coin, there are costs to you as well as the MSP if you don't enforce a minimum standard, a baseline set of security standards for your customers. So the first being obviously revenue loss. With that average remediation time of 19 days and costing $19,000 or more, that is a significant, unexpected cost to a small business. And again, I have seen MSPs who will heavily discount this bill, or I've seen cases where they've waived it altogether because they feel bad that the customer got infected. And just like when a customer who gets breached may experience a loss in reputation, depending on how it all plays out, you as the MSP could experience a reputation loss as well. And you could be known as that MSP who allowed a breach to happen. And this could be especially impactful if you are vertical or industry specific, because word, as we all know, travels very, very fast. And in some cases, you could be fined or sued by an organization if the loss or the breach was significant. You could be found to be negligent or liable, which could become an extinction event for you and your MSP. So are you prepared to put your MSP at risk and potentially lose your livelihood and the livelihood of your employees, all because you have a customer who won't accept your security recommendations and pay you what is now needed? And there could be opportunity costs as well due to the loss of other potential business that you might have been able to generate for your MSP, because you might not have been able to have anybody else who can go out and support your other customers, because now you're all busy being tied up at your best technical resources are all tied up at your impacted client site, maybe for the next couple of weeks or more, trying to help them, that affected customer, kind of move on for the breach. So there could be other support work, other projects that you might have to decline or postpone at the moment because you don't have the bodies available, which could result in maybe potential customer dissatisfaction because you're making them wait until this impacted customer is back on their feet again. And then from an operational perspective, by allowing customers to remove services from your minimum bundle, this just makes it more and more difficult to track, more difficult to bill, support, manage on a day-to-day basis, because every customer is going to be a little bit different. So your MSP would really lose out on a lot of those service optimization and efficiency benefits as well. Another objection you might hear, I'll just take my chances and I'll just pay the ransom and make a claim through my insurance. First off, I really hope that this is not a response that you get, because if you do, would seriously think about ending that relationship right then and there, because I really do see that as a big red flag. You cannot allow a client to rely solely on their insurance company to bail them out. A business's cyber resiliency strategy shouldn't be centered around just paying the ransom, because the cyber insurance industry is changing. And that's really why I wanted to add this kind of absurd objection in. Because of the increased number of attacks and the increased payouts that have been forced to make recently, the insurance agency is starting to change the rules of engagement. If your customer gets ransomed and they need to file a claim to pay that ransom, the insurance company is going to want to do an investigation first, right? And that investigation is going to take time. And it's time that your customer likely won't be happy with, because downtime costs money, as we kind of outlined earlier with the 19 days. And it's just like if your house burned down, the insurance company is going to want to send out an arson team to see if it was arson that caused the fire. And if it was, we know they won't pay. So they are going to want to do their own investigation whenever a cyber insurance claim is filed, because they want to see who's at fault. They're going to want to see and look for who is negligent, so they can effectively get themselves out of having to pay that claim. So you don't want your customer, nor do you want yourself as the MSP, to be that negligent party and be the reason that that claim is denied. And so what's starting to happen is cyber insurance companies are starting to mandate MSPs go out and have those cybersecurity conversations with all of their customers, or else they won't renew the cyber security insurance policy. So if you're not having the cybersecurity liability and risk discussion with your customers today, or if you're not mandating that they enroll in one of your new security programs, or if you're allowing them to decline your security program without having them sign some sort of release or waiver of liability with you, the insurance company has just found their negligent party, and they very likely won't pay the claim, as you can't provide that you did your due diligence and took the proper steps to protect them. And if they won't pay the claim, the customer will very likely turn and blame you for the situation, and then you're going to be on the hook to make the situation better. So you really, really want to do everything that you can to protect yourself. And if you're able to change your position in how you present and sell your new security programs, take the opportunity to do so. And then maybe the customer comes back and says, no, I won't switch, I won't pay for these new services or for this new program. And this could likely happen. You know, what if they just come out and bluntly tell you that they won't pay or they won't switch? How do you respond to something like this? Because you can almost guarantee that you are going to hear this type of response. So you really want to consider how you're going to handle it when you do hear it. You know, so say this is a lawyer or this is a healthcare client of yours, and I'm openly telling you I got this from a Facebook LinkedIn feed, I think, because I thought this was a brilliant response that an MSP gave. He used this example. You know, if you're dealing with a lawyer or a healthcare client of yours that's objecting to this, your job is to protect your clients, but so is mine. But you're not letting me do my job by refusing to enroll in my new security program I've developed. And I feel like you're not taking my job seriously as your technology advisor when I bring you recommendations that will protect your employees and your business. So I need you to sign this new agreement for our new cybersecurity program that we're enrolling all of our clients into moving forward. And then if they don't, or if they won't sign at your meeting, then maybe ask as a follow-up. Okay, well, if you're not feeling that you can sign this today, then when? Is this something that we can look at signing in the next 60 to 90 days? And then hopefully they'll reconsider that what you're asking them is very serious. And then maybe they just need a small window to adjust, to get used to these new changes that you're implementing. And then if they still refuse to sign and won't enroll in your new programs, then you really do need to have a plan on how you're going to turn those clients into less risk for your organization. Because again, no customer should be allowed to be a threat to your livelihood or the livelihood of your employees. So this can be accomplished by having them sign your new master services agreement that has some sort of limited liability waiver, or limited liability clause, or release of liability that's made a part of it. And then having them sign a risk acceptance letter along with acknowledgement of your new rate schedule, because you would put in a new rate schedule for them, and a new SLO outlining their new response times as well, that they are now going to be subject to if they call in for support. And we typically see reactive rates for non-standard clients, which is effectively what this customer is going to be turned into, that are double or even triple an MSP standard time material rate. And they have new response times that are now much longer, because other clients who are now under the standard security program, they're the ones that get priority now. So you need to manage your risk and remove as much of the risk from your MSP as possible. And by having the customer sign these documents, you're then going to have that ammunition, and you're going to be able to prove to the insurance company that you tried. You tried to protect your customer should the insurance company come after you for the liability. And then if your customer still won't sign, and they still won't sign, and they still won't work with you, they don't respect you enough as their IT partner, and I don't think they're a good fit for your business. And so you have to tell them that you can't afford the risk any longer to keep them on as a client, but you'll be very happy to work with whatever new MSP that they choose to go with, and you'll help transfer their account over to them. So let the decision be theirs, but you need to bring this to a close sooner rather than later. Really don't let it linger beyond the 60 or 90-day mark at the most, because again, you're putting yourself and your business at risk, because the risk of a ransomware event is just way too high in this day and age, and the consequences could be dire. And once you tell them this, I'm pretty sure there's a strong likelihood that they won't have the energy to go out and find a new MSP provider, and that they're likely going to sign your new agreement. But if they do decide to shop the market, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, hopefully they're going to go out and find other MSPs that are just like yourself, who have the same message, who are enforcing the same high security standards on their customers, which is just going to reinforce your stance, and it's going to help in the education process with your customers, because that's now just the way it is. So again, it just comes down to having the confidence to stand by your standards and to kind of hold firm. Another objection, it's not going to happen to me. We're too small. We've never been breached before. Hope is not a protection strategy that you can support. The idea here is that everyone is open to being attacked. No business is immune. And it may be true that the business may not be the intended target, but bad actors might want access to the suppliers and the vendors that customer has business dealings with. And therefore, that customer could act as a potential gateway to those other more desirable vendors. So in this instance, you just really need to educate your customer on the possibility and explain to them that although they may think an attack might never really happen to them, the current state of their network does not meet your new security standards that you have set for all of your customers. And therefore, you need to be allowed to harden their network security so that they can avoid becoming that weak link in the chain to their suppliers and business partners that they interact with. Another objection, it won't happen to me. Why and who would want my data? Again, hope. It's not a protection strategy that you can support. Again, the idea here is that everyone is vulnerable and open to being attacked. No business is immune. And the bad guys, they really couldn't care less about the data. They know that you want the data, but it's the ransomware money they want. This is a business to them, and they're looking for easy targets and quick wins. And typically, it's the smaller organizations who are the weakest link and who are the easiest targets for them. So just a reminder, my quick plug on our market builder, we have partners that if you're looking to do a cybersecurity awareness campaign, we have our new market builder marketing automation platform that has all sorts of ready-made campaigns, on-demand campaigns, ready-made collateral that you can brand, put your logo on, put your contact information on, and get out there. So with it being Cybersecurity Awareness Month, there was a huge campaign that was just added to Market Builder last week around cyber awareness. So if you don't have an ID into Market Builder, I have the link there. If you do have a login to Market Builder, but maybe you haven't been in it in a while, definitely encourage you to dig that ID out, that login out, and maybe check out all the new things that we've added. So the last 10 years, it's been all about educating our customers about the value of managed services and helping to transition away from the traditional break-fix type of engagements over to monthly prepaid managed services agreements. But now the education process started all over again. We need to stop promoting those generic managed services agreements to your customers and start talking to them about what you can do to assist from a threat detection, network detection, risk mitigation, and cyber resiliency standpoint via your new security programs. I keep saying it, there's tremendous growth opportunities and profitability still to be had in security, even though we've been talking about this, I feel, for years. But the challenge comes to really how do you build, price, market, and sell these new breed of security programs to your customers. And the trick is really finding that right balance of costs and services that aims to not only reduce risk, but works to protect you and your customers. And it starts with enforcing that new minimum standard for security, because that a la carte, that responsive, reactive menu option approach to security and program development and allowing a customer's budget to dictate what services they'll buy and enroll in, not really a smart business approach any longer. Because ultimately, MSPs need to have the confidence to take ownership of the risk conversation with their customers and prospects. Your customers already believe that you're doing this all for them. So if you aren't, take this time to update your programs, price them appropriately, work with your partner success manager on all of that, practice your messaging, and then go out and talk to your customers and be ready to handle that pushback that you're going to receive, because it's not only imperative to the overall benefit of your customers, but you need to do this as well for the benefit of your MSP practice. Okay, just before we sign off, just a couple of reminders. Every month I do hold office hours. So if you do, if you're going through this exercise, working on your programs, working on your pricing, obviously you have your partner success managers that can help with this, but please come to my office hours and we can chat there as well. Also, my bootcamp schedule for the month of November. I have another brand new one, November the 18th, on co-managed IT services. Is this a market your MSP should pursue? And then I have some encore presentations of my marketing 101 and my cold calling, developing a cold calling strategy. So thank you everyone for attending today's boot camp on building security programs. I absolutely hope you felt it was a valuable use of your time, because I asked a lot of it this morning, this afternoon. If you do have any questions, email me, attend my office hours. I'm on LinkedIn, so connect with me there. I'm on Twitter. I know there was issues with the calculator. I promise I'll get that out to everybody today as well. So that's coming. But thank you for voting. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.